The fact of the matter is, whether it is imported inflation, whether it is tinkering of GST for a longer period, the fact is that the burden is on the common man. And the common man, frankly, doesn't really care about what's happening in the United States or the UK or Russia or Ukraine. They're worried about their day-to-day living and per capita incomes where they are in India. The pressure is as much, magnified on common people in this country than they are abroad. And of course, you have social security systems which exist abroad, which don't exist in India. So I come back to asking you the same question. Is the government really being rather hard-hearted when it looks at these issues? After all, running a country of the kind that India is, with poor middle classes, lower middle classes forming the bulk of the population, do you think the government is doing enough, to cushion the impact on these classes of people?
So let me say that as a policymaker, one has to make various trade-offs. So first of all, let me be clear that the government is fully cognizant of the spike in inflation. Otherwise, you wouldn't have seen the measures we have taken, including the Reserve Bank tightening monetary policy. So clearly, the tightening of monetary policy is one response to bringing down inflation. But do remember that this is a trade-off, because if you do tighten monetary policy too fast, too quickly, yes, it will bring down inflation, but then it will slow down growth, it will slow down incomes, and so on and so forth. So there is a balancing act that has to be done. Ultimately, what do we want to do? We want to increase as far as possible the trajectory of welfare and real incomes. And in that context, we have to trade off between growth and inflation. So the trade-off that we are making right now is, rather than tighten so harsh that growth slows down, we are tightening somewhat, but not so much that growth slows down too much. So keeping GDP growth going, create jobs, which is an important question, which I hope we will come to later on. These are issues that are also foremost in our mind. So given this balance we have done, I think the Reserve Bank's response is the correct one for this point in time.
Well, Sanjeev Sanyal, governments are not necessarily only policy makers. They are also political entities, and you understand politics as much as anybody else. I want to ask you a simple, straightforward question that is...
I'm a policy... Wait. No. I cannot answer any questions on politics. I'm a policy maker. So if there are political questions, I'm afraid I will simply not be in a position to answer them.
Well, that disclaimer taken on board, but I'm still asking you the question that when policymakers within the government do not have enough measures that solve problems of the common people of India, they end up being called insensitive and arrogant because they're winning elections anyway. They don't really need to bother about the common man. That is the question that often comes up. How do you think the government can respond to that?
As I said right in the beginning, I'm not a politician, and winning or not winning elections is a concern of the political leadership. I can tell you the key here is that as a policymaker, I need to maintain macroeconomic stability in an environment where clearly there are serious threats to the rest of the world. You've already seen neighboring countries like Sri Lanka going into vicious cycles on their macroeconomic management. We are seeing serious issues with inflation in Europe, in US. These are turbulent times. So for me, very important that in these turbulent times, I keep a steady ship. Yes, I have to make sure that inflation doesn't spiral up. That is certainly a concern. It is a concern to the average man, and it is a concern to me personally as well. I mean, I buy the same vegetables and fuel you do. At the same time, do remember that I have to also make sure that growth keeps going, because we are, after all, recovering out of 2 years of very difficult COVID pandemic-related disruptions. And so in a situation where the growth is finally doing reasonably well, I do not want to create extra hurdles than what is absolutely necessary. So a balancing act has to be done. I think the Reserve Bank and the Ministry of Finance are doing a fine job so far, and I wouldn't get too thrown off by political rhetoric or by advice from international experts who have clearly not been able to predict how these things were going to pan out.